Reporting on the problem and waiting for a solution. The cladding crisis, leaving many living in buildings that are not properly fire safe, and even more people living in flats that are unsellable. And the government's answer for those buildings in England came today. Robert Jenrick, Communities Secretary, set it out to the Commons.
I'm therefore today making an exceptional intervention on behalf of the government and providing certainty that leaseholders in high-rise residential buildings will face no cost for cladding remediation works. We will make further funding available to pay for the removal and replacement of unsafe cladding for all leaseholders in high-rise residential buildings of 18 metres and above, or above 6 stories in England.
Now, listen carefully, because here's the key point. For months and years, ministers have said leaseholders, the owners of flats, mustn't pay the bills to rectify the mistakes of others. The announcement delivers in terms of cladding replacement in tall buildings. It doesn't deliver for those in smaller buildings or where there are costs for fire safety problems other than cladding. For those with the wrong cladding in a shorter building,
the government will develop a long-term scheme to protect leaseholders in this situation with financial support for cladding remediation on buildings between 4 and 6 stories. Under a long-term low-interest scheme, no leaseholder will ever pay more than £50 a month towards the removal of unsafe cladding, many far less.
So that's the basics of the plan. It's going to cost the government several billion, £3.5 billion set aside for cladding today, on top of about £1.5 billion already committed. And the plan is for a new tax on high-rise building developments. There'll also be a new building safety regulator to stop this getting us into this mess again. Well, it's clearly an advance on where we were, but it's not a solution to all the problems. Let's talk through with Jack Simpson, news editor at Inside Housing, someone who's been following this closely from well before it was fashionable to do so. And Jack, just give us an assessment of how far you think this goes in, if you like, clearing the problems that we hear about from affecting so many households.
Yeah, so I think it is definitely a step in the right direction. You know, Robert Jenrick said it was the biggest investment in building safety ever, really, and 3.5 billion is a lot of money. However, I think a lot of leasehold campaign groups and politicians and other stakeholders have said that it doesn't go far enough. What we will see from this is people and leaseholders living in blocks over 18 metres with cladding being covered, but many more will still have to pay either directly or through these new, what they call cladding tax.
Do we know the terms of those? Do we know the details yet? So if I'm living in a smaller building, I'm told I'm not going to have to pay more than £50 a month because the government will put the money up front. Is that £50 a month forever, or is that, what rate of interest am I paying on that loan? Can I pay it back out of a mortgage, or do we have any detail yet?
So, as with everything, the devil is in the detail. However, we do know the outline of how it works. So it will be the building owner that gets the loan up front, and they will pay for the work. And then through the service charge that leaseholders pay every month, they will be charged £50. And this is the thing, it could last for, decades, really. Some people are facing £40,000 recladding bills, and spread that over £50 a month. You could be looking at many, many years.
For as long as you're in the flat, really, yeah. Stay there, Jack, because I want to talk to you about more aspects of this. But let's get a reaction from someone we've heard from before on the programme. We've heard from many people, in fact, living through cladding nightmares. One of those was Natasha Letchford, who owns a shared ownership flat in Southampton. The building has high-pressure laminate cladding. It's not the Grenfell one, but it's another one that is no longer deemed secure, fire secure, and her building is above 18 metres. I asked her what she made of today's announcement.
It does massively increase the amount of money, which is good news. But I have to say, we are still feeling pretty betrayed by government. They've said repeatedly, leaseholders shouldn't be facing the costs of fixing these buildings. But we were hoping that he was going to announce some form of extension to the Building Safety Fund, which would mean that it wouldn't cover just cladding, but all the other fire safety defects. He didn't do that. So at the moment, although there's more money in the pot to fix the cladding defects, we're still facing costs, even if those cladding defects are covered, to fix all the other issues, which can still be really expensive. It helps, but not a huge amount.
What's the chance of you being able to extract something from the company that built the property and built it in a way that is now deemed inadequate?
Almost nothing. My property was built in 2012, so it is past the 6 years that it is the limitation period for those sort of claims. These building owners, they aren't simply going to voluntarily pay for remediation that they don't need to do, but we're left with almost no route to go down.
Are you worried that this could actually bankrupt you? Because obviously, as a lawyer, that would have massively important implications for your career. As broadly speaking, lawyers, they want to stay certified and not allowed to go bust.
Yes, that is my worst fear. Aside from there being a terrible fire in my building, the thing that I worry about most is that I won't be able to pay the costs and that I will be made bankrupt, and then I'd lose my house and also my job. I've put in a huge amount of training and effort to get to where I am, and that would be absolutely devastating for me.
Your hope would really just be that the fund gets bigger still and that the scope of it goes much more broadly than just the cladding.
Yes, it needs to be extended to fire safety issues generally, and also to those buildings under 18 metres, which at the moment they're being offered loans. But obviously that still means that they'll be paying for the cladding remediation. And the worry there is that actually a lot of them might then experience drops in the values of their properties and go into negative equity. We won't be able to sell the properties whilst they're still potentially facing these bills. And I just can't see that someone is going to buy these properties with loans attached to them for substantial remediation costs.
Natasha Letchford there on her hopes and fears. Jack Simpson still with me. Just in terms of the market size, buildings over 18 metres, buildings 11 to 18 metres, what are we talking about in numbers?
Yeah, so there have been some estimates, and we understand that there are around 10,000 buildings over 18 metres in England. And then when you take that down to buildings between 11 metres and over, that is 100,000. So you can see the sort of difference in scale there.
Massive, yeah. Now, obviously, the building industry is a big part of Robert Jenrick's solution to this, because he is going after them to get some money. One potential downside of the approach he has adopted, essentially a development tax, is that you are taxing new building. You're not going after the money for the sins of the past. You're taxing new building, aren't you? Doesn't that discourage new building? Are the developers worried about that?
Well, I think there has been some noises from developers and big house builders saying that they actually support a potential developer levy tax. Barratt, which is the country's biggest house builder, came out last week and said that, and I think they put their hands up and said that they did have some role, and developers do have some role in the issues that are coming up now. I think it's also important to point out that housing associations and councils won't be getting funding through this new building safety fund, and they're obviously really big developers as well, so you're kind of squeezing supply through that side too.
Indeed, that's a very important detail. Well, Jack Simpson, thanks for talking to us. We will be coming to this again at about p:30, and we are very hopeful that we'll have Robert Jenrick joining us tomorrow to answer some of these questions.